You're listening to Cultureful. I'm your host, Jess Lynn. Here's an interview from May 27th, 2022. Hope you enjoy. My guest today is Sheng, the editor-in-chief of San Jose Hockey Now. He covers the Sharks for NBC Sports Bay Area and Sharks Pregame Live. He previously covered the Sharks for Fear the Fin. A member of the Professional Hockey Writers Association, Sheng has voted on the last 4 NHL awards. His work has also appeared at NBC News, The Hockey News, and Vice Sports. Sheng is Taiwanese American, lives in the Bay Area in California, is married to a close family friend of mine, which makes him a good family friend as well. And he's joining me today to share about his background growing up, how he got into reporting in hockey, an uncommon career path for Asian Americans, and what it's like to be an Asian American male reporter in that space that is predominantly white. Welcome, Sheng. Great to have you today on the podcast.
Hey, Jessica.
How are you doing?
Very good.
Yeah, is there anything I missed in the introduction that you'd like to add or amend?
Well, I just voted on my 5th straight NHL award. So,
oh, nice.
Yes, that's always a funny. The awards, if the player wins an award, he, makes extra 100,000 bonus, extra $500,000 bonus. So,
wow.
but no bonus for me though. So.
Great. So let's dive in. So I've known you for a while. I think you've been with Mulan for 10 years?
Longer, yeah. We just celebrated our 13th anniversary.
Wow.
And so I've probably known you for, more than 10 then, yeah. So I'm sure I met you within the first couple of years, so. So we're celebrating our decade anniversary. You and I, our decade of friendship.
Yeah. But even though I've known you for a long time, I don't actually know that much about you growing up, and what your family was like when you were small and stuff like that. So can you please just start with sharing about your background of where you were born and what life was like? What was little kid Sheng like?
I was born in Taiwan, but my family moved to U.S. to L.A. when I was 1 year old. So I don't really remember Taiwan at all, really. The only story that I really have from back then is supposedly when I was a little baby in Taiwan, I crawled my way into a swimming pool. And wow. Good thing someone noticed and saved me, or otherwise we wouldn't be talking right now.
Yeah, oh my gosh.
But anyway, yeah, we moved to Monterey Park, and Monterey Park is famous for being I believe the first city in the U.S. to have a majority Asian population or majority Chinese population.
That's a fun fact I didn't know about Monterey. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's where we all kind of moved, right? A lot of Taiwanese in the 80s and whatnot, right? And I think they used to call it Little Taipei, I think, at Monterey Park. So that was a nickname it had back then. But anyway, So I grew up in that area for all through high school. Not Monterey Park. I eventually went to Arcadia High School, which isn't that far from there. But what I was like as a little kid, maybe not that different. If you ask my wife, not that different than I am now. Still love sports. I love sports since I was a kid. Grew up in the mid 80s. I have memories of watching actually the Lakers. Those were the great Lakers teams of the 80s with Magic Johnson. And I remember kind of watching it with my sister and brother, because I guess you were in LA. So that's what you were watching that was what everyone was talking about. Memories of the Dodgers winning the World Series in 1988. Eventually getting into hockey. My memory with hockey is when I was 6 years old, I heard on radio or TV or whatever that the Kings had traded for the greatest hockey player ever. And I didn't know what the Kings were, and I didn't know what hockey was, but the greatest hockey player. Well, that sounded really awesome. And
and that was our local team too in LA. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so to get the best of anything, that kind of got my attention. And so anyway, one day, they introduced Wayne Gretzky to the media. They also unveiled their new jerseys, which were these really cool silver, black, and white jerseys, kind of like the Raiders, well, now Las Vegas Raiders, but back then the LA Raiders jerseys. And back then, not a lot of teams wore colors like that, black, silver, and white. Not everybody wears black, but back then, though, no teams really wore black as a primary color. And so that just really caught my eye. And so I got into hockey, and yeah.
How old were you at that point?
6.
You were 6.
Yeah. So my kind of my love of the sport of hockey kind of started there and didn't really leave even through my early childhood, when we didn't have cable, because back then you could only watch hockey on cable. And back then, though, that was like the late 80s, early 90s. Having cable was sort of a special thing. So not everybody had cable back then. And so I used to listen on the radio.
Wow. That's dedication.
So, that was dedication.
Wait, so, okay. Was it just, you said you started off being really into Lakers and Dodgers. And when hockey came into the picture, did the other sports just like fade into the background? Or were you just like watching and listening to sports all day of all kinds?
Oh, it was all sports all day of all kinds. I mean, my favorite sports were the kind of the traditional American team sports: baseball, basketball, football, hockey. I liked mostly all the LA teams. I actually like the Angels more than the Dodgers, which is kind of unusual. But the Lakers, the Raiders, the Kings. I was all about all of the sports, really. Actually, growing up, my favorite sport was baseball, probably because that was a sport that I could kind of play by myself, I guess. I guess I could play basketball myself too, but football and hockey are a little hard to play by yourself. Though I still did manage, but to play at least hockey by myself too. But yeah, baseball, I could just collect bottle caps and just kind of swing, try to hit them into my neighbor's yard. With hockey, I had a pair of skates, but they weren't rollerblades. This was maybe a little before rollerblades, and my family, like I mentioned, we didn't have cable, so not that we were poor, but we just wouldn't spend money on me. So anyway, I had a pair of skates, but the skates didn't have straps, and so I learned to skate, basically skating on, if you imagine skating on a plate with wheels and no straps, and that's
oh my god. That sounds like a recipe for like a ER visit.
I fell a lot, but I was able to fall in a way where a little skinny here and there, and also I skated carefully where I obviously didn't move too fast, and no one ever bothered to give me any straps. So
oh my gosh.
But anyway, I would just play hockey by myself and just use curtain rods to shoot a tennis ball into one of those little plastic shoe racks that were shaped roughly like the size of like a trash can or whatever, something to shoot into. So I used to do that by myself. Anyway, I just love sports, and whatever was on TV. We had local TV, so we would get baseball, we get football on Sundays. Get the Lakers, and then hockey was on. The Kings were on maybe like 5 to 10 times a year on local TV. And those were always kind of event nights for me where I was like, TV's mine.
Oh my God.
Because we only had one TV back then. So
did anyone you said your sister watched some with you? Did the rest of your family watch sports with you?
I didn't really watch it with me. It's more with them. They did not carry that sort of that interest in the Lakers or whatever, since that time. I think back then I never asked them about it, but my guess is because like the Lakers were like in the NBA, they were the team of the 80s. And so in LA, they were celebrities, they were rock stars. A lot of people were watching Lakers back then. So they probably just got into it because, the local teams in the finals playing the Celtics. So let's put that on. So it was actually, I would say, more something that I did like mostly myself, really. Yeah.
Wow. And how did that love change or not change when you started going to school and middle school, high school? Like, did you join some of the teams?
Well, this this is my sob story. Like, I always wanted to play a little league, but my mom wouldn't let me play, or wouldn't let me try out because in stereotypical Chinese or Asian fashion, it was going to interfere with my studies.
Oh no!
And so,
You should have present Sheng should have been like gone back to talk to your mom, and be like, actually, this will be really important for his career.
Yeah, maybe, right? Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah, I could be Shohei Ohtani right now, so but yeah, so I ended up not ever like joining like an organized league or anything like that. Always loved playing in like in PE or whatever when we got into teams. I was one of those kids that took it too seriously, because this was my competitive outlet because I couldn't play little league or whatever. I wasn't allowed to. But I love sports all throughout growing up, and that's probably how I ended up, or that is how I ended up with it in my career, because I didn't actually start writing about sports until much later in my life. I became a writer first. I studied creative writing first, well ahead of getting into sports. But then later in life, when I wanted to write about something I liked, well, I went back to the thing that I had loved from pretty much the very beginning. And so all throughout middle school, high school, I was always rabid about my teams. If they made it, if they're in the playoffs, if they made it far, it was always watching it. Or by the time I got older, I could record games. And by the time I got older, we got cable and we had multiple TVs. So yeah, I didn't need to monopolize the TV anymore for it. But so I've always loved sports. Always loved I guess the big thing that's different now is that I don't root for the local hockey team anymore, which is the Kings, because right now I cover the San Jose Sharks. And so to do that job, to be an objective reporter, you can't be a fan. At least in my opinion, you can't be a fan.
Wow. Is that hard for you to not be a fan?
Not anymore. It was at the very beginning because, when the first NHL team that I covered was the Vegas Golden Knights. That was the new team in Las Vegas in 2017. And so up to that point, I had been a Kings fan for, how long was that now? It's like almost 30 years, 88 to, almost 30 years there. And anyway, that first year was a little different because I've been used to being a Kings fan and watching every Kings game. But then you really quickly figured that if I want to make this a career, if the Kings do something well, Golden Knights fans aren't going to care about that. They want to see Vegas do well. They want to see me cover the Vegas team. They don't want to see me talk about the Kings. And anyway, it all kind of came to a head actually that first year covering the Golden Knights when they actually played the Kings in the playoffs. And in the very first round of the playoffs. And very quickly, I made the sort of leap that looked like I used to be a Kings fan, but if the Golden Knights lose to the Kings, that's bad for my career. Right. The Golden Knights are eliminated out of the playoffs, or I need to, after a game, talk to a grouchy Golden Knights player because they had just been, lost a playoff game to the Kings. That's not good for my career. And so it was pretty easy to kind of make that calculation, which is, a little bit, I guess, callous in some ways because people kind of think that team loyalty is such a big deal. And it is, I'm still loyal to the other teams I grew up with. I don't have to cover, like the Lakers and the Angels. But it's what I want to do with my career. And so that's just sort of, I guess, the sacrifice that I thought I had to make. And so, it's not hard. I haven't watched a Kings game besides the ones I'm covering, from start to beginning since, 5 years ago. So,
wow.
So I'm the biggest Kings fan from 1967 to 2017, basically. 67 is when the franchise started. So, but after that period, though, yeah, not so much so anymore.
That doesn't sound callous to me. That sounds professional.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
But in sports, though, that sort of team loyalty is a big deal, though. So people take that very seriously, and they kind of wonder, well, how could you be a diehard and not anymore? But then, if you really think about it, the concept of a team, I mean, you're just kind of rooting for laundry, you're rooting for a name, right? It's not like you work for the team. It's not like the team is actually doing anything for you. They're not paying your bills. They're not, they're not putting a roof over your head or anything like that. So
yeah, definitely. So going back to, you're talking about studying writing first and kind of getting into writing before you knew that you wanted to report on hockey. Like, let's go back, like, how did you know you wanted to be a writer? And then, like, when did hockey come into the picture as what you wanted to do with your writing?
I think for me, writing, it was when I was in middle school, and I like a lot of things, like these kind of things. I really liked the girl, and, and I started writing poetry for her, and I back then I was really really shy. I didn't how do you say it? Those years were hard for me. I didn't make a smooth transition from being a kid to being I don't know.
Adolescent.
Yeah, like a smooth talking adolescent, like a good imitation version of adult. I didn't make that transition like other high schoolers do or whatever, right? Or middle schoolers. So yeah. So anyway, it sort of became like an avenue for me to talk, like because I stuttered a lot especially when I was in a nervous situation. I would stutter a lot. So talking to girls and making those kind of moves were just beyond the pale for me to even really think about that. And so the way for me to sort of speak and have confidence became in my writing, because from I guess sort of the beginning, I liked it and I thought that I was good at it. And when you're younger and you think you're good at something and people reinforce, be it teachers or other your peers, right? Like your friends or other kids in your class or whatever, right? Like, oh yeah, this is good or whatever, right? Then it sort of becomes like maybe your thing kind of. Mm-hmm. I really got into poetry actually, and for all those reasons, and was really into especially really all of the kind of the classic English poets, but particularly the romantic poets, the English romantic poets like John Keats and Lord Byron. This is more high school, but I really got into all those kind of things. And I was never a normal high school kid, so
who is? Yeah.
Who is? That's true. That's true. But some people seem like they are more, but
right.
But then probably internally they're not though. They just seem normal on the outside to people like me who are totally different. I don't even have I never had even the veneer or appearance of being like everybody else. So, but anyway, so it just got into something that I really was interested in, and I read a lot, especially in those years in high school. Spend entire summers pretty much reading, 6, 7, 8 hours a day, just classics. And that's really a lot of my kind of literary education came during that time. And so anyway, by the time I got to, having to choose what to do at college, it was, well, naturally, I wanted to study literature and wanted to become a writer. And so my major, I went to UC Santa Barbara College of Creative Studies. And that's sort of one of those, they call it like pick your own major kind of school. Like they don't give you actual grade. It's just pass fail. Very, very artsy. But my major technically from there is literature. And obviously I took a lot of writing classes there, writing poetry classes there. And my goal at that time was I was going to be, a great poet, and, your kids were going to read about me in their high school textbooks.
What kind of poetry were you writing at that point? Was it did you ever merge your love for sports and poetry at that point?
A little bit. I
like writing hockey poetry and,
Yeah. By the time I got to, I think when I grew up, I had that kind of bias or cliche too, where I read the sports newspapers all the time, but I never thought of them as true literature. I'm, on one hand I have the LA Times sports page, but on the other hand I have Don Quixote. And Don Quixote, that's high literature. That's, that's immortal stuff, the sports stuff, it's good, but it's disposable. That's sort of what was on in my mind, and I guess there is some truth in that. There's not going to be, honestly, a lot of sports writing that's going to, last hundreds of centuries from now, but then again, though, there's not going to be a lot of novels like Don Quixote that last centuries either. So anyway, growing up, I sort of separated the two. I still love sports, but I didn't think of it as it's a high minded thing I'm doing now, watching sports or whatever. But then as I started writing more poetry, and then you write kind of what and so some of the better poems I've written, I've used baseball allusions or hockey allusions, because those are things that I understand. I talk about, being into romantic poetry, and, a big part of romantic poetry is, nature and love of nature. But, all those old English guys, they grew up in the Lake District in England. They grew up before the Industrial Revolution. So, yeah, they didn't grow up in the suburbs like me, where it's rare to see a stretch of green, like a really wide open stretch of green. It's rare to not have light pollution, obscuring the view of the stars. They could write about nature because they lived it, but it was a little harder for me to do that. Being where I was from. So yeah, so you learn to write about what you know a little bit there. But anyway, finally, so how I got into sports writing through it all. I mean, that's sort of a long story. Essentially, I spent most of my 20s as a teacher, and I was really good at it, but I didn't like it at all, really. I had a good sense of basically how to, big part of teaching, especially when you're teaching younger kids, is commanding the classroom. And I had sort of a natural gift at that, but I didn't like being that person that had to be, for me at least, I had to be kind of strict and all that sort of thing. And I was good at it, but I didn't like doing it.
What grade and subject?
I taught all levels. I had my own after school program for a year. That was kindergarten through 6. So you teach kind of everything. You help them with their homework.
Wow.
I've taught college too. I've taught, I think I've taught SAT, did a little practice there, or like after school kind of high school kind of tutoring. So all kinds of different levels. But anyway, it's basically when I hit 30, I wanted to do something different with my life. And I thought, well, I studied literature. I just finished my master's actually in creative writing and poetry. But I think I sort of lost interest in writing poetry to some degree. And so I thought, well, I still like to write and I want to write. And so, I like to make money doing something I like, which is writing. And so then the first thing I got into actually was advertising. And then I actually did pretty well in that, insofar as, I got a low-level position at an ad agency in New York. And then I was sort of it was an agency called Admirasia, which was a kind of a multicultural, basically an ad agency that serviced Asian or Asian Americans and that sort of thing, wrote or made ads directed for the Asian population. A lot of big clients there, Nissan, whatever, right? And I was sort of like the English guy there. So if they needed a deck translated to present to the client, I would, look it over and make sure the English was all good, or rewrite some stuff in it, And I also, I wrote a couple of my own campaigns, pitched a couple of my own campaigns, all that kind of stuff too. And eventually, within a year and a half of that, I got a mid-manager position actually out in San Francisco for a, I don't think it's around anymore, but it was called High Five Marketing, and it was a sports lifestyle marketing agency. And I got a mid-manager position there. But very quickly, I learned that being a manager was, I was more of a creative sort. And so that really didn't fit with me. So anyway, long story short, I quit that job. And I could have got back into advertising, but then, after talking with my wife a bit, we just sort of talked about what do you want to do? And I still wanted to write, and I love sports. And I had already kind of been doing, writing a few things here and there. This is all the way back in like 2012 or 13. And she said, well, why don't you just go for it? If this is what you love to do. And so I sort of just took that leap around then. And I would say in 2014, and, made that leap into sports writing full time.
And that really sounds like it was a leap of faith. Did it feel like it was a faith?
Yes, no, absolutely it was. Like what we didn't realize at the time, and what I didn't really explore, what we neither of us really understood, was this was when, newspapers have been, a shedding, sort of when we grew up in the 80s, it was a big deal working in a newspaper, that sort of thing, right? That was sort of the pinnacle of that, in particular industry. At that point, a lot of, sports writers were losing their job that worked for newspapers. And online was still sort of, because online, everyone expects the work to be free.
Right.
And obviously, you can't make a career, you can't make a living off of free. So there were very few, paying a decent amount online sports writing jobs. So it was really a difficult, almost impossible time to kind of get started.
Mm-hmm.
Credit a lot to my wife Mulan for always believing in me. And I would say from the beginning, I've always believed that the work I did and the attention to detail that I had was different than other people. And I believe that that would see me through to a more successful phase in my career. And it has. But now I think about it, though, it really shouldn't have happened. I mean, just not the norm, to kind of last in this business, especially starting kind of with nothing, in terms of like, I didn't go to journalism school. I didn't have any connections starting out. I just wrote, and I try to write things that were different but relevant still to people. And it just sort of worked out.
So how did you build that career in hockey reporting? Like, how did you start from like a blank slate, like, like you were saying, like, not having those connections and that background to where you are now? What were the pieces that,
I would say that from the very beginning, like the approach I try to take was, and I tell this, some people come up to me for advice about what, people who I guess want to start their careers in this field. And they ask me, well, what should I do? And very consistent advice I tell them that I have practiced from day one is to write things that are interesting. Right. And I know that's really general, but the way I look at it is that I am like a 24/7 sports fan. I am very knowledgeable. I will look through stats. Like I'm a diehard sports fan. And so I try to write things that would appeal to me as a diehard sports fan. It's basically things I didn't know, things that like questions that I was curious about. Not, not to give too specific example, but just basically like, like what's the record for that? Well, instead of just stopping at that or just looking it up, saying, oh, it's not out there, and then going about my day, the approach I would take is I'm going to find out what that record is, even if I had to add the math and do that and spend like 30 minutes on whatever Excel or digging into different websites, because I am curious what that specific record is. And once I do that research, then I'm going to put out an article about it. And yeah, it does kind of service like a small audience, but then it serves an audience though that's like me, that's really, really into this stuff and speaks to them. So anyway, I think in general, from the beginning, my approach was something like that, where it's the best I can do, especially back then where I couldn't interview any like players or people connected to the professional side of the game. I just was writing on my laptop, watching a game, but, just try to write something interesting, different that they can't get anywhere else, just every time out. And so that's consistently what I've been trying to do. Just think of different things. And again, it's not being different just for different sake, it has to be different, but relevant too.
Right.
I think that that's something that I've been able to do from the beginning, which has, allowed me to kind of, I guess, continue to grow in the field in terms of, notoriety or whatever. So.
What is can you hear that car? No. Okay. Also, could you hear my cat earlier? He was like at the door. Meow, meow, meow.
No, I couldn't hear the cat. I did hear that car.
Oh, you did?
I didn't hear a cat, but it's okay. Don't worry about it. This is a real conversation. This is a real conversation, right?
Yeah.
So things that happen.
I'm just curious, like, what is being picked up by this mic? Yeah. So is there kind of like a common career path that you hear from your colleagues in sports reporting? Like, because my imagination of what a common career path is would be someone that played a certain sport their whole life and then maybe played until they had to retire or something, or had to pick something to do, but then also like didn't know what else they wanted to do. So then they started, dabbling with the writing aspect. Is that like kind of, is that true for like the common experience more than like your experience, or do a lot of people kind of go in from like the fan, background and like the writing background and then kind of go into like merging that with their sports interest?
I think I don't know this for certain. I guess that's one thing I probably didn't do enough when I was early in the career that I probably should have done. Just ask more people about their paths and how they got there. But I've read different stories. You hear different stories talking with your colleagues. There's a still pretty common path of getting a degree in journalism and just working your way up from there. You graduate and you start at whatever paper or whatever, and just kind of work or website, and you just work your way up from there. So that's still a very common path. It's just not as common or lucrative as it might have been before, with newspapers all being shuttered or whatever, right? But a lot of people do take the approach as a fan, like I did, and start writing at small fan sites for free, and you just kind of build a following with your voice, and then eventually you convert it into something that you can make a degree of a living on. It's still not a great living by any stretch, but it's better than free.
Right.
And then there are people who did play sports at a fairly high level, be it in college or even high school, but college maybe, or even like professional levels. Then they decide to do something else, because they can't make it to the NHL or whatever the highest league is in the sport. And so then they use that knowledge, though, that kind of experience they have in the sport, and they combine it with skills, be it written skills or on-camera skills, and they make a career of it.
So I want to go back a little bit. How did you decide hockey? Because you love all these different sports. Like, what about hockey is like you want to do this for your job 24/7? Like, why hockey? To someone like me, I'm just like not really into sports, and so
Sure.
like they all seem like they have an similar appeal to me.
It was really simple with hockey. Just by the time I decided to get into this career in my 30s, just hockey was the sport I liked the most at that point.
But why?
Okay, well that's a good question.
It's really meta, huh?
No, it's not. I'm just trying to think though, because when I first got into sports, when I was a kid, I liked all the sports pretty much equally. And so I'm trying to think why hockey more so. I don't know. Actually, I don't know if I have an answer for that question.
Is this not a question you get a lot?
No, that's not a question, because people who interview me are they're doing a hockey podcast or whatever, so we all like hockey already.
You guys all get why hockey.
Yeah, so we all get why hockey is the best.
Did Mulan never ask you this?
No, she probably has, but I'm just trying to think. There wasn't any kind of like inflection point or something where I was like, oh, I like hockey more than baseball, or whatever. Yeah, that's a good question. I guess it just over the years, because like I said, when I got into sports, I liked them pretty much all equally. But just over time, I just like hockey the best, and I couldn't really tell you the reason why.
There's like a je ne sais quoi with hockey.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. But all I know is by the time I decided to make that career transition, though, that was like easily, I still like all other sports. I could still watch all the other sports. But and actually, my very first sort of writing forays, I kind of had the idea, oh, I wrote a football story, actually. I think that's the very first, like, I had a blog, and that was the very first story I wrote, was actually about football. But still, though, of all the sports, though, hockey was the one that I really loved the most. I can tell you why I picked hockey when I really decided to take my my writing career seriously. But I couldn't tell you how hockey sort of became that sport, which is unusual, because obviously, growing up in LA, and I went to my undergrad in UC Santa Barbara, so none of these are hockey hotbeds. And so just hockey became the sport of choice for me. Yeah, it's good. I'm not really sure why it became so. I don't know.
Interesting. Well,
maybe it's just me being different.
So, maybe, yeah. Let me know if you think of it at some point,
Sure.
like just in life.
Yeah.
But then when you ended up deciding to write about sports, you were saying, like, you can tell the listener and me why it was hockey. Like, why was it hockey?
I think with hockey, I think I guess in terms of just why I enjoy watching the sport so much. I do think it is maybe something to do with the kind of the smallness of the fan base in some ways that I kind of enjoy being a part of that. It just things it just seems closer in a way, you know, like it's easier to talk to your fellow fan. It's easier to well, when it became time to talk to the players or whatever, that seemed easier too. I don't know if that's true or not. I've interviewed sport, you know, players from other sports, and you know, hasn't been any sort of issue, you know, either way. But maybe it just felt that way. Sort of that beauty of the sport, just trying to be so delicate on these blades that are scraping the ice, and then you have a stick and you're trying to work this, you know, this kind of this flat disc and manipulate it into the positions that you want, a natural, you know, kind of positions for it. The speed of the game, the physicality of the game. I think that that is one of the beautiful things about the sport, that combination of speed, grace, and kind of physicality that you don't get as much in most of the other team sports. You do with football, but football, you know, I also, I guess I've never liked sports that were so brutal. And so football seemed a little brutal to me at times. And hockey, I think, in my mind, I don't, you know, this is all kind of eye of the beholder thing, but I think hockey had a little more kind of grace to it, a little more beauty to it. And so, yeah, so I don't know. I've never really thought about, and even in that sense too, like why I ended up liking hockey. Well, I guess it goes back to the question why hockey became my favorite sport, but also though in terms of why I like it so much. You know, I've never actually really thought too much about that too. I just sort of became the one that I liked the most, that I had the most passion for, that I could relate to the most. So
you can relate to the most.
Yeah.
Tell me more about relating to it the most.
You know, I'm not sure.
Okay. No worries.
It's not a good answer, but I'm trying to think though. Yeah, if I think about my own kind of background growing up, I mean, there's really not anything that would make you think that I would relate to hockey. Yeah, actually, I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not even sure if I can answer that question too. So yeah, yeah.
Interesting though, and yeah, like just hearing you describe hockey, hearing what hockey is like with you as the beholder, I'm like, wow, that does sound beautiful. I've never thought of hockey that way. And like how different it would be to go to a hockey game with you or someone else that loves hockey and to hear them talk about what they're seeing, you know, what you see and what you're observing. And I think, you know, maybe I don't have a love for sports because I didn't grow up with an understanding of sports. And I mean, we watched the Lakers, like, you know, around the time you were talking about when I was really small, because the Lakers, you know, were in all these playoffs and they were doing really well. So, you know, it was like easy to root for the Lakers. And my parents watched around that time all the time. But, you know, since then they haven't really watched sports, and they haven't really watched a ton of other sports. And yeah, I've been to one hockey game in my life and I had no idea where the puck was. It was in St. Louis. And yeah, I just like couldn't follow the game. I had no idea what was going on. And, you know, I was kind of fascinated by looking at the crowd. Like, wow, all these people know where the puck is. Mm-hmm. They know when to cheer. They know when stuff is happening. Like, I'm just like hockey blind, right?
Yeah, maybe it's one of those things where like it's like that little band that you like, and then it's your band, and if you get it, you get it, kind of. Yeah, but you can learn it too, though. It's not like it's an exclusionary club.
If you like, if you're not exposed to it, you know, like young or don't have like the innate love for it, but also don't have people explaining it to you, then, you know, you don't really know that much about it, and then you don't enjoy it. And sometimes it's just like, okay, I don't understand these sports people, but it would be kind of cool to be really into something like that, and like have a team to root for and be, you know, sharing that experience with other fans.
Yeah. You know, you kind of have that community, right? And so, you know, I mean, that's one of the appeals, I think, for a lot of people, just that community you can build, be it with fellow fans or fellow hockey fans, or I think that's a big part of it. And I think maybe with the hockey community, it's because it's a little bit smaller. It is a little bit more of that kind of experience where this is like your like indie band or whatever that you're really cool, and you know, it's not too big,
especially in the US, right? Like in hockey, is it just like hockey in Canada, in my mind, is like basketball or football here.
Oh, sure, absolutely. Yeah, no, it is absolutely the number one sport there. But in the US and especially in LA, to find a hockey fan there, or in this case in San Jose, it's a little bit more rare. And so it's a little bit more like, oh, I get you, you're cool,
So yeah, I had this other follow-up question for you. You were saying when you were in school, in middle school, high school, you didn't get to join any of the organized teams because, your parents are worried about your academic performance. What about after you kind of flew from the nest, like in college and grad school? Like, did you pursue playing sports, when you were an adult?
I just wasn't really good anymore. So, so yeah, like when I was like really young kid, I was pretty good at sports, and yeah, and so that's part of why I was into it too, because I wasn't the best whatever basketball player when I was in second grade or whatever, or the best whatever, but I was pretty good though. It wasn't like a last pick kind of player. By the time I got into like when I could make more of these decisions myself, I just wasn't very good, very athletic. And so just wasn't as fun anymore to do these things when you're like not even like pretend good at it kind of. Whereas with writing, I could actually be good at it, or at least have, if even though I'm not good at it, I could reach a point in the field where, people think you're good at it, whether you are or not, so.
Yeah, interesting. So you like wanted to kind of be competitive, right, at a certain level to enjoy.
Yeah, I guess whatever you do with, I mean, not necessarily, not everybody would have this I guess point of view, but for me though, to be honest, like if I was gonna do something with kind of my career, my life, I would want to be really good at it. Whether it was copywriting or even teaching, like I would want to be
some level of excellence from yourself.
I guess so. Yeah. I mean, that's always what I wanted. And that's how I knew teaching wasn't for me, because, I didn't have that passion to be that kind of teacher. I think that the other things I got into, I had more of that passion. You need that kind of passion. You need to love, what you're doing, to have a chance to be the best at it. So.
Yeah. That's an interesting perspective, because I mean, I've taken up a lot of different, physical activity, like sports and different hobbies as an adult that I kind of separate from, my professional life. I have a certain, expectation of excellence for myself. But then, I also used to rock climb, and I was just like all giggles. Like I would like do a little bit fall and be like, because I think in my head, I am like not a great rock climber. I'm, just someone that just tries, and has a good time. So then it was just like, fun enough just to go and hang out and try and fall and giggle,
Yeah, I guess, going back into like getting into sports when I was a kid, that probably became like a part of my personality, just watching all these sports that kind of competitive nature, some of that is, nature versus nurture, where does that come from, or is that kind of put into you, but I've had that my entire life, even poetry, I, wanted to be the immortal poet that's read in high school textbooks. So even that had an end goal too, it was not to just kind of enjoy it and enjoy it along the way, but that's me, that's just my personality. And so I guess overall, like, that's maybe not necessarily how like I can relate to hockey, but that's how sports related to me in general. Just seeing the athlete, the best in their field, win a championship or whatever. And in the same way, I want to do the same thing in my field.
Yeah, that does make sense. I see that connection for sure. When you talk about like your personality, I hear my mom's voice being like, "Oh, talk about astrology," and I'm like, "Okay, no, I'm resisting it. Let's not talk about astrology." So, let's talk about being Asian American and a reporter in hockey. What is that like for you? How do you feel like you're received? Do you notice that you're a minority when you're in those spaces? What is that like?
Yeah, I mean, definitely you notice, I think there might be a half dozen Asian NHLers, and I think they're all like half Asian. So yeah, but yeah, there's 600-ish NHL players. So yeah, so a half dozen that look a little bit like me. So you definitely notice that. Among my colleagues too. There are definitely more Asians, be it writers or people behind the camera or people, behind the scenes, producing things, right? So there's definitely more representation there. But still, hockey is a sport that honestly, it's mostly the most of the fan base is Caucasian, and so it's reflected in the people that work in the field too. I don't know if I can ever think of a time that I've really felt like the other or out of it, not myself, but I think though that there probably are subtle ways where I am that I maybe just don't realize at the time. I've had conversations with people who work in the field who are, who are Asian, and they tell me that's very much there, even if it's sort of a subconscious thing that people carry, just that you don't look like one of the guys out there. Like myself, like I'm 5'8", like I don't look like an athlete. I never, was an athlete really. And so if I'm going up to a, 6'2", professional hockey player, and I'm trying to like ask them technical aspects of the game that I've self-taught myself or learned, and not that I'm wrong, like with things I'm asking, but like, who are you to be asking, like,
right.
And no one's ever said anything like that to me, but, is it possible that someone kind of thought that in the back of their head or was not aware of that bias they had? It's, probable. Yeah, that's happened. So it's one of those things in general that like, I would say that, I'm aware of, but I try not to, I try not to let it be a defining thing. Like I know that I'm good at my job. I know that I understand my job. And if someone decides to judge that I'm not good at it just because of how I look, then that's sort of their loss more than anything, because they're wrong about that. I am good at what I do, and so that's sort of I guess the mental approach I take with it. Just that I don't. I know it's there, but I try not to let it sort of define my daily experience.
And how has like developing rapport with Sharks players been since you started covering them?
Oh, it depends on the player, right? Some player, they all have different kind of personalities, and so you just sort of have to learn, try your best to learn each of them to the best you can. And it's been harder to build rapport the last couple of years because of COVID.
Right.
Once the pandemic started, we weren't allowed into the locker room anymore. When we were allowed in the locker room is a little more kind of a free-for-all experience where the players, after they're done practicing, they come in and they take off their gear, and then, and then they go off into their private, whatever area, right, to shower or whatever, right? But, you have that space there where you can kind of talk with guys and, get to know each other a little bit. But that really hasn't been the case the last couple of years. So it's been a little harder to build that rapport over Zoom interviews or, now with the Sharks, we are able to talk to the players one-on-one. They bring them out to us, but it's still sort of it lacks kind of the intimacy of talking to the player in kind of their space, kind of, in the locker room. But yeah, so anyway, the larger picture of building that rapport with guys, it just sort of, again, it just sort of depends on the guy. Yeah, it's been okay though. Yeah.
What you're saying about like trying not to let it define your experience, how other people might be perceiving you or what's, maybe they're running like in their minds when they're speaking with you. I'm curious about the other end of that, like for you, walking into a space like that, and especially growing up in Monterey Park, where, you're not really a minority, right? Like, was that uncomfortable for you at first, or had you already had experiences like that where you're walking into a room and there's like no other Asian person in there? Do you have like friend circles like that? Like, how did you feel about that, like in the beginning, and how did you get comfortable with it, if you are comfortable with it now?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with it. I just never really thought about it too much. I mean, when I was a teacher, I lived in New York and I taught at a Hasidic school. I was after school, a Hasidic school, and there I was teaching boys aged like 7 to 12 or something like that. trust me, no one looked like me in a Williamsburg yeshiva school. And so I've been in, even though I grew up in LA, definitely been in environments where, I, the only guy who looks like myself there. And so that I never really thought about too much. I know it's there, it can be there. And, with some people I talk to more than other people, but, I think from the beginning, just I had the confidence of the preparation I put into it and the work I put into it, and that would sort of, for most people, that would be the more defining thing than what I look like. So.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting to hear. I feel like I get the question a lot because I used to work abroad. And I've been in a lot of spaces where I'm the only Asian person around or the only female person around or both. And yeah, I get that question a lot from, people I meet, like, how do you feel, when you're the only person, this and that, whatever. And then people are usually like a lot of times surprised when I say like, I'm not uncomfortable. And usually I notice it in the beginning, but sometimes like after a little bit, like I don't remember. And then something happens. I see a photo of me with everyone and I'm like, oh, right. Right. I guess I was the only, non-XYZ, whatever in the room. But I really haven't had a conversation with someone where that was also their experience. So that's interesting for me that's like, in some ways similar to your experience.
I'm trying to think about because I think that, at least for me, I know for me, some people may be able to kind of multitask or think all these different things, but still kind of perform. But for me, though, if I didn't have sort of a single-minded focus of, I've over-prepared for this and that, like I've, done this research, this and that, like I am ready for this. If I don't think that way, and I started to think about other things like, oh, what does he think of me? Oh, I don't look like him. That would chip away at my ability to be good at my job. And so I'm not sure other people may be able to kind of carry all that kind of baggage, and still kind of overcome it and still be good at their job. But I know for me, though, I definitely need that single-minded focus, especially, early on, in this career where early on, I was talking to people that I was watching on TV that, I loved watching on TV, literally just a couple of years before. And I couldn't imagine that. Oh, now I'm actually talking to this guy,
this is not a screen. This is like his face, or their face.
So that was a weird transition the first couple of years because, I'm talking about, these are guys like, I have their hockey cards. I've seen them on TV. I was a fan, and so now I'm, And so if I also add other stuff like, oh yeah, like I'm the only Asian in the room and I don't look like a hockey player, and do they think I'm a pretender or do they think I'm an idiot? I wouldn't be able to do my job, so I wouldn't be able to grow in my career. So, but I'm not sure. I mean, that's my experience though. Some people may be able to be more conscious of it and still excel, and more power to people who can do that, because to me that's that's incredible to be able to do that. So.
Right. Definitely. Yeah. I never thought of it that way. And I think maybe that's, why I have a similar experience, because I can't do that multitasking in my head either. So we've talked about, how you feel like the players and, the other folks you work with, how you feel like you're received and, your perspective when you're outside of like the hockey space, when you're with friends and family, how do you feel like you're telling them you're wanting to focus on hockey reporting full time? How was that received? And how is it, how do people take that?
Oh, it depends. I mean, my mom still asks me if, I'm going to get a real job.
Oh my gosh. Uh-huh.
So, because I tell her when I go back to LA to visit, I tell her, oh yeah, I'm going to downtown LA, and she'll ask me, oh, what are you doing there? I'm saying I'm there to watch the hockey game, to cover the hockey game, because the Sharks are playing the Kings at Staples Center, and now Crypto.com Arena. And so, so that's still her common kind of response. And well, that's.
And she's not joking.
Yeah, I don't think she's joking. But that's all right though. I mean, that's you got to get used to that. Kind of growing up, understanding what her expectations of what a job are, and also, kind of why she moved us here and, went through what she did, and she wanted us to be lawyers and doctors and that sort of thing, right? That cliche. And she didn't want me to play baseball and play little league, right? And understanding, where she was coming from, and that, that was for what she thought was my good, and I get that. So that's all right. And but yeah, it just depends on who you talk to. Some people think it's a really cool job, even though I don't know not too many. I have a couple friends, but not too many of my friends are hockey fans or big hockey fans. Only two actually I could think of, and they're both Asian, funny enough. But anyway, though, but most people that I'm friends with, they're sports fans, to a larger or lesser degree, right? And so yeah, so they can relate to, oh, it's cool, you get to go talk to the players in the locker room, even if they don't know hockey or know the players, and so so it's sort of that, oh, you get to get paid to watch a game, so that kind of seems glamorous to them, and so some people are into that. In general, though, it does seem, though, I don't know, I'm not sure why, but I just haven't run into any people. I don't know. I'm not sure if the work I do is much different than what other people do that don't talk a lot about my work with even my old friends or my friends in general, because I don't know, they aren't big sports fans, or they don't really their careers aren't kind of aligned with what I do, which is being an editor of a website, a news website, and that sort of thing, so yeah, so don't end up talking about my career too much with my friends, so unless they're into hockey. So
that's surprising to me. I just assumed that most of your friends are also hockey fans.
No, not at all.
Especially if you grew up watching so many sports. Oh, okay.
No, I mean, well, in LA, that would have been hard to do. That's another thing too. Like, I've loved, as much as I love sports. Like, yeah, I would say most of my friends aren't like huge sports fans, or they're into other sports. And so you find other things to connect with people, about, and it just, was never so much about hockey. Yeah. So.
What do you guys do for fun usually, you and your friends?
Actually, just drink. The pandemic changed things, but like, some of the things, get together with people, go to Oktoberfest, or like, go watch, or go argue about movies. That's one thing that I can talk about that is not sports related. I'm really into movies, and I have a lot of friends who are into movies. Just go to the park and hang out and drink.
Okay, that's a much easier thing to find other people that are a fan of, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. So, and like I said, really we'll talk about hockey, which is probably a good thing, because I'm so inundated in hockey and working the field, and trying to chase stories, break stories, write stories, that it's good to be able to take a break with friends I've had. These are another part of it too, is that like most of the friends I have are friends from a long time, friends from high school, friends from undergrad at UC Santa Barbara, friends from grad school at the news school. And these are all people that were friends before I got into the sports writing field. So our friendship, would go beyond, sort of that career, because I didn't meet them, while I was doing this, or meet them through it or whatever. So.
Right. Yeah. That's definitely, very relatable for people that are doing all sorts of different fields now.
I'm trying to think if I do more things with my friends and drink, so I don't want to give the wrong impression. I actually don't drink a lot. I promise everybody listening. I only drink socially, so I never drink on my own. That's just my own personal rule. And so yeah. I actually don't see my friends a lot these days. So.
And so when you do, it's time to celebrate.
Exactly. Yeah.
Great. So I want to wrap up with some overarching questions. So all in all, like, after all these years, do you still enjoy what you do with watching hockey, talking about hockey, reading about hockey, all that stuff? Like, is your enjoyment of it still there?
The aspect that can be a little tiring is the news site I run is basically a 24/7 Sharks website, and so And I take that pretty literally. And so I write it pretty much every day of the year, a little bit at least. Or if I don't write that day, I've written ahead the day before. Um, I have basically a new article every day on the site, and in season it'll be two, three. The busy times of the year, two, three, four, five articles a day. And
Wow.
so that can kind of pile up and get a little bit just heavy to kind of lug. But the actual aspect of watching the game and being part of it, I still love that. Sharks have been a bad team the last 3 years. They missed the playoffs the last 3 years. Every year at the end of the season, all the other writers and I, we joke about, oh, thank goodness the season's finally over. But if I'm honest, though, I actually really love being there watching, even if the team is not a good team that's going to make the playoffs. But I still find things to watch, things to look for. So I still really love that aspect of it. I haven't grown the least bit tired of it. And yeah, I do really love the job overall. I think it's a job you do because you love it. It's your dream. You have a passion for it. Because there are other jobs that you can do that can make you more money or make it easier to relate with other people or whatever. Like there are a lot of other jobs that hold a lot of different kind of positives or whatever. If those are the positives that you're looking for, or if those are the things that you want from your life. But if what you want for your life is to, do what you really love, then I'm doing it.
That gives me the chills. I feel like very few people can say that.
Yeah, yeah, I do get that impression. I guess that's one thing that I do notice. I guess talking with my friends and they tell me like, yeah, like, through the years when was struggling more in this field, they would be like, yeah, I admire, that you just keep at it or whatever. And I don't know, sometimes a part of me thought that they were just me because they were making like, you know, that much more money than I was or whatever, but but I did know what I was doing in that sense that, I wanted to do something that I really liked doing. And so when I stopped really liking what I'm doing, then I will stop doing it. But yeah, I mean, I guess if you look at the things that I've done over my, career, what I studied, it's always been sort of that, just, I want to be happy doing what I'm doing and be into what I'm doing. That's important.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I feel you. I'm the same. Any favorite moments of this past season you want to share with us, or just like any favorite anything? I'm losing my words. It's nearing 10 o'clock, so I'm losing my words.
Well, no, I guess the favorite thing that I would say is just that been my wife's support through all this. Yeah, I mean, this, as difficult as it is for a writer to start, where I started and to kind of make your way out. The beauty of our field is that anybody can do it these days because, newspapers aren't that impactful anymore. There's the internet. And that's the beauty of it, that anybody can come from anything and make a career of it. But the other side of that beauty is that, well, if anybody can do it, that means everybody is trying to do it.
Right.
And so it becomes a very, very competitive field. And so it's hard to kind of have your voice stand out. And so that was sort of my challenge. But one of Mulan's challenges was just to be supportive through these years where she always believed in my voice and that I could do things in a way that were different and were good and were quality, and she could see those things. But wasn't always rewarded for that, though. Be it like jobs that I might have been passed up for or whatever. And but through it all, though, she's been really supportive and wouldn't be here, with you and in the position that I'm in my field, the relative success I've had, it's still not sort of that complete success. We talk about the competitiveness, that I want, but it's definitely, definitely have made very demonstrable kind of leaps in my career. And I couldn't have done it without her. So without her in my corner.
Yeah. I'm so glad that, you gave her a big shout out. Definitely. It has been years and years of her support. So, yeah, I agree that that's like not easy. And also, I want to say, to you about, your friends admiring just like your stick, like Ruben made up this word called stick-to-itiveness. And like, that just every time I'd be like, wow, he's still at it. Like it's a challenge, but every time, I would check in with her, like you were still at it. And it did seem, at times like it was very challenging. So yeah, I don't think I've told you this to your face before, but I really admire you as well for your stick-to-itiveness.
Thank you.
That's not a real word, right?
No, I don't think so.
It's a real word, but it's so much fun. So I'm putting it down recording to see if like eventually if it gets used enough, maybe it can get, turned into a real word in a dictionary or something. Cool. Well, thank you so much for taking the time, hanging out with me, sharing your story. I feel like I learned a lot about you, and I can like imagine little kid Sheng a little better, and then like medium-sized Sheng, and then high school Sheng. It's so much fun. So how can our listeners like follow your work, and what are your handles or whatever you want to share?
Sure. You can find me mainly on Twitter at Sheng_Peng. All my work at San Jose Hockey Now, and also at NBC Sharks. And those are probably the main areas you can find me. And I hope to see you guys there.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
P.S. Just thought you should know, my husband was right. Stick-to-itiveness is actually a real word. According to the Britannica Dictionary, the definition is the quality that allows someone to continue trying to do something, even though it is difficult and unpleasant. P.P.S. Sheng also has a podcast called the San Jose Hockey Now podcast. Check it out. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you like this podcast, remember to follow us and share with your networks to help us grow. We are also on Instagram at The Cultureful, where we look forward to your messages and ideas for future episodes. This episode was edited by Ruben Yana Ruben. I'm Jess Lynn. See you soon.